Recently, I was attending a webinar about our depth of consciousness and what is reality. It was empowering and shocking to know that our idea of what to expect creates the process of reality that we will experience. So let me leave you with that thought for just a moment. So our idea of what to expect creates the process of reality. Reality is an illusion in its appearance, but not an illusion in its process. If you look at what it was like to grow up as a child in the early 1960s to 1980s, we had time outdoors every day, running through the forest, playing in the garden, wandering through our neighborhood, playing with the children who lived around us. For those children who are growing up today in the 2020s, they have play dates, time is segmented and compartmentalized, and their experiences are cultivated by the nurturing that is controlled and expected. What is the reality of childhood and experience? How do we learn and grow, and what nurtures us to become the people that we are? Now, with these ideas in mind, I invite you to think about the lens in which many of our communities grow up. This is with acceptance or without acceptance because of, could be race, could be color, could be financial situation, family situations, reputation, religion, and more. Our guest today, Yvette Cole, is a kindergarten teacher and a children's author. And celebrating Black Awareness Month, her book, Harriet's Dinner Party, is getting a buzz. And it's being brought to the forefront for shining a lens on some important history that's been invisible to many of us through the decades. Her frustration with not being able to show the reality and the richness of Black history in North America has created this first story. I say first because I know there's going to be more. Today, we want you to be thinking about what you know as reality and what is illusion. And when we take time to be present with our stories, our truths, and our experiences, we have a chance to know truth and empowerment and the richness of reality through history and what we can realize. You're listening to Be Well with Michelle Greenwell. This is sponsored by the Cape Breton Tea Company, as well as Dance Debut, Inc. Yvette, thank you for coming. Welcome to the show.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
All right. So before we start, I always like to set the stage with the healing experience that people can get from listening to this podcast. So I always set the intention. And I wanted today, because you were coming, I wanted to use my Harmony coasters, which are brand new. They haven't hit the market yet. They will by the time we release the podcast. But the art for this one has been done both photographs of nature that have been run through infusers. Some of them were run through AI infusers, so they're a little bit different. And I thought it would be nice to bring in today the guides card. So how our history, our families, our inspirations can support us. So this is the vision. So for those people listening to the podcast, it looks like a fairyland, I guess I'd say, with tree trunks and branches and then flowers in the front. And there's this beautiful orb right in the middle. It looks almost like there's a footprint inside the orb, as well as some flowers and some other circles and shapes and a bright orange glow right off the center. But I'll read off the back the inspiration so we can set our healing intention for today. So rosemary is a part of what's in the card for purifying and cleansing. Follow the guided light of your wisdom and way of knowing. Know that all you need is already inside of you. And feel the power of timelessness that frees you from locality. All right. So with that in mind, I always like to also bring in a cup of tea, hoping people will take the time to sit and relax or at least sip on tea as they go. What have you got in your mug today, Yvette?
Okay, so first let me just show you guys my mug. My mug has some names of Black historical figures, like it says Malcolm, Harriet, Martin, so that's exciting. I got this for Christmas. And in my mug is raspberry tea, and it's also lavender chamomile tea. So like I like to mix my teas.
Mm-hmm.
Raspberry is my favorite one.
That is beautiful. It just means you're a tea artist. See, there you
Yeah,
are.
exactly. Yes.
Oh, I love your mug too. And because for those people that again are on the podcast, it's bright, bold colors. Each person's name is in a different color and it's bright and vibrant and you're holding on to history with that mug. I love it.
Exactly. Thank you.
Yeah. Mine today, I haven't had this one. My mug says the Mind Institute, and this is a part of Berkeley University out of California. It was a program that was developed by a professor that I was working with at one time, and it was developing ways of interacting with music. And this has penguins that are bouncing all around it. So, but I was thinking more about the stories we tell and what it means and our illusion of reality. So I was thinking about just when I was thinking mind. And then I put inside a brand new tea called Mental Clarity. So it has peppermint in it. And it brings about clarity of purpose and opportunity, and the awakening to possibilities and changing our viewpoints. And what we hope to do today with our conversation is have people thinking a little bit more about what history is there that we haven't heard or discovered yet, and how can we start to bring it forward in a much better way. So here we have everything set. Cheers to you. Thank you for coming on to the show, and
Cheers.
slange to those people who are listening. Oh, always love that midday. Okay. So to get us started, Yvette, do you want to share a little bit about what it was like for you growing up and some of the experiences that you had and the role models?
Yes. So I'm from New York City, originally from Harlem, New York. I currently live in Connecticut, but I'll always be a New Yorker. And I say that because New York culture is so rich. Growing up in a fast-paced environment, there's so many resources, and that's one of the things that I'm very grateful for growing up in New York City. Um, I when I was a kid, we played a lot. Kids don't know what it is now to like go outside and have fun. And it's kind of sad. I remember being in the parks every summer, like almost every day. I grew up swimming. I got swimming lessons for free through the New York City Parks Department. So that was like a passion of mine, and I was actually pretty good. But I'm not competitive. So like after I got older and I started being on like higher levels, I stopped swimming because I didn't want to compete. It was just not my thing anymore. Um, I was very close with my family. There's six of us, my mom, my dad. I have two sisters and a brother. And I've had a turtle since I was 10. That's a fun fact about me. So now my turtle is 21. My turtle's a boy. His name is Franklin. I love him. Um, and turtles are like my spirit animal. But we had a great childhood, just very close family. We have a lot of like traditions, school traditions, and it was just really a beautiful experience growing up in New York City because of the resources, like I said. And like even now, I don't have any kids, but I think to myself, what are their experiences going to be like growing up in Connecticut? Because there's not as many, it doesn't have as many things as New York has.
Mhm.
So that's my childhood in a nutshell.
And in Connecticut, are you in a small town now?
I think it is kind of small. Yeah. Where I'm at in Connecticut is a little closer to New York. I'm in Stamford, Connecticut.
Mhm.
So I used to live in Hartford, Connecticut. Hartford is the capital. Connecticut is bigger.
Mhm.
Um, but I like Stamford. It's nice.
Um, and New York, I'm just thinking it's so interesting because I grew up in Calgary, Alberta, which at that time was it was much smaller than it is now. Now it's a big metropolis. But at that time, it was probably similar to you to be able to run outside. We had a green belt behind us, which was a huge green space. And we just walked through the fence and we were in our world, whatever that world was going to be with the swing sets and the monkey bars and all those pieces and pathways to ride up and down. And yeah, yeah, it was a magical time. And I think about how clocks didn't exist. You didn't know what time it was except for when the bell rang that it was time for dinner, or you heard the call come. It was time for you to come in, or the calls when it would be bath time because you had to have that bath before bed.
Yeah. You know what I miss? I miss the mindfulness of my adolescence. Like just being in the moment and not being concerned about like what everybody else is doing. Like now because of social media, we're always concerned about like other people's lives. And it takes away from our experience, like our daily experiences. So
Hmm.
I feel like you probably can relate to that too. Like
Hmm.
we were more in tune, with ourselves, with the world as kids.
That's a really good point, because you are always checking to see what the other person's doing, what they're wearing, what do they look like, where have they been. And that before was if somebody went on a trip, they just went on the trip and then you didn't see them till they got back. And then that's when
Mhm.
you tuned into, oh, they were on a trip, but you didn't really notice while they were gone. So, yeah, yeah, interesting. Um, so, when did you decide you wanted to be an educator? Was that something that was always in the background for you?
Okay. I love this question. Because no, it was not. So growing up, I wanted to be a doctor. I was very serious about it. Everybody would say, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I want to be a doctor." I went to school to be a doctor. I studied pre-med. It was my track. And then I was not good at math and science classes. So I didn't want to give up my dream of being in the medical field. So then I thought about occupational therapy school. Um, but the whole time that I was like, trying to be on this track, I always was involved with kids in my life. Like growing up in high schools, I would spend my summers volunteering in the child life specialist department. So I worked with like kids who were sick and I would like help them feel more comfortable seeing the doctor. What else did I do? I used to be, I worked at a Montessori summer camp. So I always worked around kids. And I remember in college, I did an internship at a community center. And my mentor at the community center, she told me she would see me with the kids and she would be like, "You would be such a good teacher. You're so good with the kids." And it used to make me really mad because in my mind, I'm like, this is not what I want to do. But it took a while. It was a journey. After college, I taught after school for like a year. I taught first grade. And that's when I realized I was like, I applied to OT school, but I also applied to early child education programs. And I got into my early child education program. I did not get into OT school. And I think that that was like, I'm grateful for that
Mhm.
because I secretly did not want to get into the OT program because I was like, but I'm not going to be able to work with kids anymore. It's not going to be the same. They were always calling me. But I love the authenticity of children. They're just honest. They know good people. They have a great mindset. And kids are funny. I like
Mhm.
to laugh. And that's one of the main reasons that I love being a teacher. I get to laugh all day. It doesn't feel like work.
And you're working with kindergarten, so you're working with those ones who are just starting to discover all kinds of things.
Exactly. And prior to this, I actually used to teach preschool. So they were even younger. Yeah. Yeah.
That's beautiful. When you are looking at the school system, because you're too, like you said, not thinking that's the direction you were going to go, and you're looking back at the kinds of things that were available to you in school, plus two that you were living in New York, because that, that means you have a lot of different resources there. As you look forward to what you're doing now in Connecticut, can you tell a little bit more about the school system, the books that you couldn't find, the stories that you wanted to tell, but there weren't the resources available?
Yes. So let me just apologize to everybody listening. I'm a little sick, so that's why my voice sounds a little raspy. Um, but growing up in New York City, I the way that we got exposed to Black history was not necessarily always in a positive light. So in the sense that when we were exposed to slaves, one of the images that they showed us, like when we learned about slavery, we learned that slaves picked cotton. And now as an adult, I have like kind of like PTSD, like, and it's weird to say PTSD, but not PTSD. Cotton makes me feel uncomfortable because of the way that it was exposed to me and the correlation that I have with it to slavery. When I see cotton, I think about slavery. And that's because of how it was taught. So I would say growing up in New York City, um, when we learned about Black history, it would be stories about slaves, or it would be stories about people who fought for like civil rights. Like you learn about Martin Luther King, you learn about Rosa Parks, but you don't necessarily learn about all of the Black people in history who uh, did things to help America progress, and like the people who were the inventors and stuff. I learned more about inventors, like the Black inventors, from home. So what I would say is that I didn't necessarily see and learn about positive images of Black people. Does that make sense?
It does. And it's really interesting to think about cotton. It never crossed my mind to think about it in the way of how did we get it? Because it happens in a lot of different products as well, even with who's sewing the different clothes that we wear and
Yeah.
what situations that comes in. Yeah, interesting.
So can I say, so now growing up and being a teacher, like the curriculum that we have at my school, they're exposing kids to history in a different way. And I kind of like it. Like they talk about George Washington Carver. There's a unit on plants. They talk about George Washington Carver. They talk about Ray Charles when they do a unit on disabilities. So there are curriculums now that introduce Black people in ways that are not necessarily related to like, for lack of a better way to explain it, like negative things that have happened in history.
Hmm.
Um, so I think that that's helpful. That's going to be helpful in shaping the minds of kids, because the way that they're exposed to things are different in some curriculums. Keywords, some curriculums. Like in this curriculum, cotton is exposed to the kids. The first time they see it is in the farms unit, and they learn that cotton is used to make clothes, and it's a plant. So when I saw that, it made me feel uncomfortable because, like I said, cotton makes me uncomfortable. But I thought, like, what a good way to expose kids to cotton. These kids are not going to be traumatized when they see cotton like I am now, because of
Hmm.
how I was taught about it.
Hmm. 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 So as you were working through how you were going to bring about the resources, I'm in awe that you decided you'd write a book and you'd make it possible to build the resources you couldn't find. Do you want to talk about the process, I guess, of making that decision? I'm going to write this book.
Yeah, I almost felt like it was a duty that I had to fulfill, because teaching and working with like a lot of different kids and families, I had a lot of difficult conversations surrounding like talking about like teaching kids about race and diversity and stuff. But I also had a lot of beautiful conversations. And what I found from these conversations, especially like during the pandemic and stuff, is that a lot of parents want these resources. They want their kids to be exposed to, like history, and maybe they want their kids to learn about some uncomfortable topics, but they just don't know how to talk about it. So when I experienced that, I felt like it was necessary, very necessary, for me to create a resource for teachers and parents to be able to teach their kids about Black history. Um, I had someone say to me that it was burdening kids with the worry to teach them about Black history. And it really, at first, it made me angry. And then I started thinking, and I said to myself, what does that mean? What does Black history look like to that person? What do they think teaching kids about Black history looks like? What does that look like to them? Because if to them, it looks like telling kids of all races that Black people were slaves, white people were slave owners, white people are bad, Black people are bad, however you want to put it, that can shape your opinion of if you want to teach a kid about that or not. So that's one of the reasons why I decided to write the book. And the writing process was actually very scary for me, because it wasn't hard to write the story. But it was scary for me to talk about it, because I know that this is like a topic that a lot of people don't want to talk about. And in some states in America, they're banning books like mine, because they're saying any book that talks about the critical race theory, which like implies that racism is this, excuse me, systemic, and any theories that make white kids feel bad for being white, or any theories that any theories like that, they don't want you to, they don't want books to be in schools that are under the critical race theory. But like I was saying, I feel like this was important. Kids need to learn about Black history, and I wanted them to learn about it in a way that was fun and engaging, in a way that's doesn't make anybody feel bad, in a way that makes everybody feel empowered.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking about how excited I was to learn about Mr. Bojangles. So I'm, as being a tap dancer, um, and if and Bojangles ended up dancing in Canada and changing the way people looked at how performers put on their makeup, how performers performed, and then um, he became very famous for his stair routine, which is also really interesting. And so the excitement of hearing the history of those stories, and being able to bring that forward to really celebrate how tap dance changed is interesting. So I love how you thought about the perspective that you wanted to bring to the book, and also to open the conversations and create the opportunity for people who want to know more stories and they want to really dive deeper into the history that hasn't been written, and it might be in whichever area of our history that it is. When you went to write the book, we were talking before we started recording about the cover, and it took you a while to come up with the cover. Do you want to talk about how you chose the artist who could illustrate the story in the way that you wanted it to be visualized?
Yes. So when you have a dream or an idea, I got to start like this. Some people, you tell them your dream, they're going to think that you're crazy, right? Like when I was telling people that I knew that I wanted to write this children's book about Harriet Tubman, they were like, you're not going to be able to do this. This can't be a picture book. Like it's going to have to be a chapter book. There's too many words, too much this. And I'm like, you don't understand. I see the vision in my head. So I had a lot of art notes for this project. I researched artists who illustrated like Black historical figures before, who specialized in African American art, Black art. And I found a woman named Janine Carrington, and she's actually from Canada. Excuse me. So I want to give a shout out to Janine Carrington, because she did an amazing job with these illustrations and following my art notes, which were super, super detailed. I told her, I told her that I wanted the book to be like mysterious. And that's one of the reasons that I love the cover. The cover is actually one of the pages in the book. And one of my favorite things about the cover is that there's a woman in the window, and I don't want to ruin who it is in the window, or a person, let's say a person, because we don't know if it's a man or woman. There's a person in the window, and that's one of the things that like when I introduce the book to kids and I say, what do you guys see on the cover? What do you think about the cover? They say, we noticed there's a woman in the window. And when I read this story to my class, this is a funny story, and I showed them the book and I said, who do you guys think is in the window? One of my students said, I think that's you, Miss Cole, because it's your book. I think you're in the window.
I love it.
I thought it was so cute. But yes, I thought it was very important to find an illustrator who had done similar work to the work that I was looking for. And Janine did a great job. And every page, if you were to take the words out of this story and you were to just look at the artwork, each illustration tells a story, especially if we look at this page, when the main character goes into the living room with Harriet, and you look at her house, I wanted her house to look like a museum. Like if Harriet Tubman was famous, like famous when she was alive and got like the notoriety, like if she lived in 2024, how would her house look? And that's what I wanted my illustrator to bring alive in these illustrations. I didn't want her to be dressed in rags. I wanted all the characters to look royal, because even though during the times that they were alive, you know, they weren't necessarily treated royal like royalty, or they couldn't necessarily dress, you know, that royal. I wanted them to look like more modern versions of themselves.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so the book, for those people that are listening to the podcast, it's Harriet's Dinner Party.
Yes.
And so I just I'd say that because you're holding the cover up and I can read that, but I just wanted to make sure people listening would be able to get that. And so do you want to give a little background about the book too? So you referred to Harriet Tubman. What can you tell us?
Yes. Okay. So Harriet's Dinner Party is an amazing story. And I'm not just saying that because I wrote it, it's really amazing. Um, it tells a story about a 10-year-old girl named Destiny who goes on a walk through the forest, and she finds herself at Harriet Tubman's house. Harriet Tubman is having a dinner party, and she invites the young girl in. And as they're talking and the young girl's looking around Harriet's house, the doorbell begins to ring. And each time the doorbell rings, a Black historical figure comes and brings a dish. And towards the end of the book, the girl finds out who Harriet Tubman is, because she doesn't know who Harriet Tubman is. She kind of finds out how all of the guests and Harriet are connected, and she learns how she fits into this story. She kind of figures out why she's there. So that's the book in a nutshell.
I love how you just said, as the reader, the kids will be identifying with this girl going to the dinner party for Destiny to go. But how does Destiny fit into that history? Because I don't think we talk about that. We talk about this happened to my grandparents, this happened to my parents, when I was little, this happened, but you don't ever talk about what does it really mean to me? What is that piece, knowing where I fit? That's an
One second.
interesting way to bring your narrative in and to conclude the story. Can you tell me what some of the kids have been saying after you've read the story?
Yes, but first, can I tell you how kids can understand where how she understands how she fits in,
Mm-hmm.
which is one of the takeaways that I want kids to get from this story. Um, Destiny finds out that she's at dinner with all of these Black historical figures, these civil rights Black historical figures that were involved in civil rights, who fought for racism and stuff like that. And at one point, she's doubting herself. She's telling her mom, "This is what I experienced, but why would I be at the table with them?" And her mom says, "It's perhaps it's your destiny to be as great as them, to do something to change the world." And one of the things that I want kids to take away is that they have the power to be agents for social change. And I think that's one of the most powerful parts about this whole conversation, is that it's important to teach kids about history. And it's because when they have the knowledge to understand what's right and what's wrong, it's not a blame game. We're not blaming anybody. We're empowering them to, you know better, you do better. So it's like if they know what happened, they're gonna want to do better, because we don't give kids enough credit. They know how to be good. They want to be good. So if we look in history, we know that kids have what it takes to be agents for social change. We know that in the civil rights movement, kids were a big part of that. If we look at Martin Luther King's granddaughter, she's like 15. She's an advocate for civil rights. If we look at Greta Thunberg, who is an advocate for climate change, she's older now, but when she was younger, she was like a huge advocate. Um, Kids have what it takes, and I just encourage kids to always be do-gooders, change makers, um, have the courage to be kind. And if you feel like if you feel like you want to make a change with something and you know something is not right, stand up for what you believe in. If you go to the park and there's litter on the ground, there's a whole unit we do on Earth. Start an organization and start picking up the litter. Stuff like that. I want kids to take that, have that mindset as they, go on through life. I think that's important.
One of the things I was listening to a lovely webinar yesterday from a professor in New York. So, but she had mentioned one of the research pieces is that when you have a purpose, your reaction to trauma or a situation that could turn into trauma for you is decreased because you have a purpose. So for those people that kind of wander, they're not really sure what they should be doing, even if your purpose is to support the community by picking up the garbage, by being aware that you could be making small changes in the community, that's going to change the way you're going to react to any situation that you have, because it's going to decrease the effectiveness of what would have been a trauma-induced opportunity. And I thought that was just such an interesting statistic when we don't really think about, as an adult, what is my purpose? Or as we get older, am I fulfilling my purpose? But when you're looking at children and, they're playing and trying to figure life out, they're not thinking about what is my purpose. But then when they have the purpose is to have a community that I'm proud of, or a community that I keep clean, or that I've reached out to the person in the classroom who seems to be sad today. My purpose is to help others. It just really changes the way you think about it, and then knowing that how that helps you down the road.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think your
It's such.
book brings that around. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I
Okay.
answer your other question? You were saying, how did my kids react, right? That's what you also asked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So my class, I love my class. They were very funny. So one of the things I shared, they were saying, "Oh, I think Miss Cole is in the window." But so out of all the Black historical figures in this book, the most one that they're familiar with is Martin Luther King. I don't think I mentioned, I'm not sure if I mentioned some of the Black historical figures, but Martin Luther King is one, Ruby Bridges, Sojourner Truth, Ida B. Wells. And when they saw this picture of him, they were like, "Oh my God, that's Martin Luther King. He had a dream. We learned about him." They just started saying all of the stuff that they learned. And he's like very popular in my class. Excuse me, especially since we learned about him recently. So they were like just amazed that the main character, Destiny, knew him. And they were like, "Oh my God, how does she know him? She knows Martin Luther King." And they were just trying to figure it out, and they found that to be so cool. I also read this book. I did another reading at the Boys and Girls Club to a group of second graders, and they also recognized Martin Luther King. So just him alone being in the book is like mind blowing to kids. They're like,
Mm-hmm.
how does he fit into this story? How does she know him? How does Harriet know him? They forget about Harriet when they see him. And then they love Harriet again at the end. But I just think that that's such a beautiful thing.
And it's interesting as you're saying that, because I'm thinking about when a family has a dinner party and the children eat dinner, and then they usually are like, can we leave the table? Can we go play? And they're not really thinking about who are they sitting with at the table. But this storybook brings you around to actually paying attention to who are the adults sitting at the dinner table. And
Mm.
they might not be famous people, but they might have really interesting stories, or they might have done something really interesting in the community. But you wouldn't know that if you just wanted to hurry up and eat your mashed potatoes and then run
Yeah.
off to go and, play on your computer game. But you
Mhm.
actually started to have a little bit of an interest in who are the people that mom and dad would invite over for dinner, or maybe
Yeah.
grandma and grandpa. Um, it that's a even that isn't something that people talk about so much, because a lot of dinners now too, you might be on the run from one lesson to the next lesson, or not everybody's eating together because the schedules don't jive, or you're eating in front of the TV instead of at the dinner table. There's a lot of things that can happen, and it's you put a lot of details, subtle details in, that people may not realize as that
Mm.
story unfolds. Yeah. I guess that brings us around to reality and our
Yeah.
perceptions and the depth that you've introduced into this story and the layers that you can actually bring out of it. It's lovely.
Thank you.
So now how can people get a hand on one of your books?
Okay, before I share that, can I just say something about the title of the book, Harriet's Dinner Party?
Mm-hmm.
One of the reasons that and I changed the title a couple of times, and when I thought of Harriet's Dinner Party, I said this is perfect. And I wanted dinner and party to be in the title so important to me because dinner, food, everybody loves food. No matter what culture somebody is in, whose house you go in, everybody loves food. And parties, everybody loves parties. So just the title alone, Harriet's Dinner Party, everybody in any culture in any part of the world can identify with this title or resonate with it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Food just brings people together in parties, and I thought that was important. So I just wanted to share that. That's another detail about the title of the book.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you said where can you find this? Find this on Amazon.com. If you type in Harriet's Dinner Party, you can find it. You can also find it on my website, booksbyYC.com. If you buy it off my website, I do get more of a profit. So that would be very helpful. And if you guys want to check out my illustrator, if you guys want to check out my illustrator, her name is Janine Carrington. And she has a website. If you're interested in writing a book and you live in Canada, you live in New York, wherever you live, she can help you out because um all of the images she can send digitally. You don't necessarily have to like meet her and work with her in person. So she's
Mm-hmm.
awesome.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. So I will put that information in the notes. So if people are listening to the podcast, then you can know you can always go back to the notes. That's a possibility. And it is important to keep in mind that the author doesn't make a lot of money selling the books. And so the opportunity to purchase from your website is a really important one because the money does come back to you. And I'm sure you have many more stories to tell. So I'm hoping people will be inspired to pick up this book, which will inspire you to continue to write and create and bring those resources forward for people.
Thank you so much.
Beautiful. So I like to always finish with a way that we can get people to move. And I was excited because you're a kindergarten teacher. There's lots of things I'm sure you do in the classroom, but as people finish listening to the podcast, it's a place where you've been able to be nurtured, but then we also want you moving forward, taking a step into the new ways you're going to be thinking about things and how you might have been transformed by this conversation. What kind of activity is a go-to for you, for yourself, or for the kids?
There's a couple. So on YouTube, there's like a whole bunch of fun games you can play, like gym runs, I call them. And it's kind of like the kids are running through a virtual world. Jack Hartman is great. I don't know if you know about Jack Hartman. He's like a kid favorite all over the world. And then I like to do yoga sometimes. Like when my class needs to be calm, I have yoga cards and they get in like downward dog position, all these different positions they can do and it calms them down. So that's how we get our movement in.
Perfect. Thank you. And I thought I would do a shout out to Dan Devian, which is a musician that I worked with when I did my Stacy on the Keyboard storybook, that I had to create all the music to go with it so that I had action activities. So from Dan Devian's, there's a song called Back to Back. This one might be fun it's great for kindergarten. So you're standing back to back, which can be very difficult for people, particularly little people, to trust somebody behind their back and to be able to come together. So that's a great piece in it, but you turn around and you shake hands. And that opportunity to practice shaking hands, but also to connect with another person. And then you actually change places with each other. So as we were talking about changing perspective and reality today, for me, that's a great way to step into somebody else's shoes, step forward into a new place, create kind of a bond that's in a bubble. So it's a great way to celebrate how you can connect with other people. There's a little bit more that goes with that piece of music as a dance, but it's a lovely one for preschoolers and kindergarten to be able to participate in. So that's Dan Devian. He's known as Dan the Music Man. Okay, wow, Yvette, I am so excited that we could have this opportunity to speak today and to get to know you a little bit more. And I wish you the very best in the sales with the book, but also in the way that your message comes forward. And I know you have lots of gifts to offer as you continue to tell this story and it gets a wider audience. So I wish you the very best as you do that.
Thank you so much. And I'm just, you know, when I wrote this book, it's not about the sales. It's about the message. So I hope that when people read Harriet's Dinner Party, they take away her beautiful story, her humanitarianism, and we just encourage our kids to be better, make the world a better place.
Exactly. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So this is the end of this episode of Be Well with Dr. Michelle Greenwell, and it's been wonderful to bring you forward through this whole season as we've talked about transformations that people make. And each week we've had a different focus that we've tried to bring forward. And as we bring this season to a close, there's some wonderful ways to start thinking about how you may have grown or transformed as a result of listening to the podcast. I invite you to go look at some of the archives, see if there's some conversations that might resonate with you, and stay tuned for season 4 as it unfolds in the next coming weeks. Take care and have a wonderful day. Be well.